What's going on, everyone? This is Benjamin Dixon, and I want to talk about the school resource officer, Ben Fields, in Spring Valley, who threw around the student like a rag doll. A couple of key points. I want to keep it as short as possible. Number one, it's almost a point in America that you need to really think twice about calling the police for anything that does not require brute force and violence. I've seen too many examples of people who call out the police for assistance with minute things, and it turns into someone getting killed or someone getting maimed. So, it just simply, you need to think twice. This cannot be a classroom management technique, right? This was a student who was a bad student who was refusing to do whatever the teacher said, whatever the assistant principal said. He just was not complying. However, what we saw the police officer do cannot be acceptable, an acceptable method of classroom management in America. It just cannot be. I've taught in the worst schools that Florida had to offer at the time. The worst schools. We've broken up fights, pulled muscles. My little short behind out there trying to break up a fight, pulling muscles. And only in those types of circumstances do you need that type of force, where the officer is throwing someone around and using brute force to subdue somebody. This student simply did not acquiesce. This student simply would not do what they wanted or what they asked. And so I don't think that this should be an acceptable method of classroom management. It doesn't matter if you're a teacher, that's part of your job. Part of your job is to control your classroom and to manage it, not to always outsource it to police officers. Number two, and this thought was stimulated by a tweet by my friend April Rain, who wanted to compare what happened to Sandra Bland to what happened to this student. And my takeaway from this is that you have a certain breed of human being, and I use human being loosely, who cannot handle being disrespected. They cannot handle being challenged, having their authority challenged, and it becomes intensified when they're challenged, particularly by people of color, and they're challenged by women of color. Without a doubt, I know this because you see men who are quicker to snap on women than they would another man. Right? It may not be that they are they dislike women so much as they are afraid of other men, or it could be both. They're afraid of other men and they just have a disdain for women. But if you cannot handle being disrespected by citizens, if you cannot handle being disrespected by women, if you cannot handle being disrespected by people of color, then one job you should never go into is to be a police officer. And in this case, it's similar. Don't go into being a teacher, because you are going to constantly be challenged. You're constantly going to be disrespected, and you're constantly going to have to stay on your toes around the people that you have been hired to serve. That's the key thing. You have been hired to serve them, not abuse them, and not lose your cool simply because they did not respect you in the manner in which you thought you should be respected. Last but not least, maybe not, I think I have a couple other things to say, I don't know. But the other thing I want to say is that our police officers are no longer being trained to de-escalate. If they are being trained to de-escalate, they are no longer demonstrating that ability to de-escalate. In fact, they look like they would rather just escalate and just throw people around, shoot people when they could have tased them. There's so many other options at their disposal that they don't even take anymore. And you know what? The problem is that it's legal. In so many instances, it is legal. They didn't do anything wrong according to the law. That means this entire legal system has to change. Our expectations of our police officers must change. We can no longer allow them to run around under the auspices of protecting and serving, and what they're really doing is abusing. It cannot be acceptable. So for everyone who's going to say, yeah, but this was legal, I'm challenging the entire system. It must change. This cannot be acceptable on the school level. It cannot be acceptable in the community. You must meet force with force, the appropriate level of force with the appropriate level of force that you've been met with. And a student simply being rude, a student not acquiescing, a student refusing to leave a classroom, but has not raised her voice at you, has not hit you, you do not throw around like a rag doll.